right, hello and welcome to the video. My name is Wade Smith. Um, this video is about something that happened, probably 25, 26 years ago. Uh, in my old sensei Mark Myers dojo, whenever we were sparring, it was me against Darren, who was then a second degree black belt, and I was probably a second Q or second degree brown belt at the time. This is one of the first times that I actually stalemated or maybe even beat Darren. Um, but so what happened is I threw a roundhouse kick, and I'm trying to remember which leg it was with. It was probably with my left leg, and he evaded and swept my right leg out. All right, and so I'm naturally going to hit the deck. All right. But what I did is to salvage the situation is I continued my spin and I used my right leg and counter swept both of his knees out from under him as I was hitting the deck and on the floor, and I recovered back to standing position and he ended up on the ground. All right. And so it's like, I've had 4 strokes since then, so don't judge me by what I look like now because I'm telling the truth. It's just that, it's hard to train when you're 50% numb in both feet and your left hand. So just bear that in mind. But so I threw the roundhouse kick and he somehow evaded and then counter swept this leg out from under me, if I remember correctly. And so as I was falling, I'm on the ground and I swept back with my right leg and reaped both of his knees out. Of course, Sensei warned me not to attack the knees like that because there was a risk of destroying his knees. But he ended up on the floor and I ended up standing up faster than him. All right. So that's the way. This is very rare in MMA because apparently, I don't know why, but for some reason they don't think about stuff like this. But you can't attack the knees in MMA either. But which is probably why you don't see this happen quite that often in MMA. You can attack the calves of the standing opponent and reap their feet out from under them. But you got to lay off the knees because attacking the knees directly is banned in MMA. And for good reason. When it happens by accident, people end up with destroyed knees. But this is an excellent, for example, first of all, if you were in a street self-defense situation, don't throw a high roundhouse. But if you threw a low roundhouse and your low roundhouse to the leg missed, then it's a good thing to be able to recover from missing and still take out your opponent's legs, right? Let's say if you were trying to attack the leg and you missed. All right. This is why we don't encourage roundhouse kicks and especially high roundhouse kicks for street self defense. But if you threw a leg kick in a street fight and missed, your momentum is going to end up giving up your back if you're not careful because you're going to spin around and say, "You're my attacker." You're going to spin around with your momentum and your back's going to be like this. So you need to follow up with either a spinning back kick to their abdomen or a spinning sweep of their legs is the best 2 ways that I can think of and know from sparring experience that do work. You can also, of course, do the spinning back fist thing, which is going to catch a lot of street fighters off guard that aren't professional fighters. But spinning back fists don't work against professional fighters very often. But in a street self-defense situation, it probably will catch your opponent off guard if you throw a spinning back fist. As while recovering from a missed kick. At least it'll hopefully spinning back fist or spinning back elbow will hopefully keep them from taking your back. Doesn't work very often against professional fighters because professional fighters are much better at keeping their guard up and not falling for it. It does work sometimes, which of course we've seen in highlight reels, but I'm just saying 9 times out of 10 that should not work against another pro fighter. But the spinning leg reap can and does work because when he sweeps you, he ends up closer to you than he realizes he is, and he's going to get hit by it. All right, so Also, I would just like to add that, when doing standing grappling submissions, somebody you want to isolate an arm, all right, or a leg, and isolate their other weapons away from your body, all right. So that's the whole point of that. So you're not going to the inside of their guard on a standing submission. At least I don't like the idea of doing it. You see these BJJ fighters that like to go double underhooks and get to the inside, and the problem I find with double underhooks for a street self-defense situation is your opponent can bite you in the neck or face or shoulders or elbow over the top and hit you in the face a lot easier than you might realize. But the biggest danger is them biting you in the carotid artery while you're going for double underhooks, which almost happened to this dude in a real street self defense situation. He got bit up on all his shoulders and his back trying to fight a guy the BJJ way, which is to go for double underhooks and a takedown. And the opponent didn't play along and bit the tar out of him 6 times all over his shoulders and back. And he's lucky he didn't get bit in the carotid artery. So going to the inside when standing grappling does not make a lot of sense to me. It makes more sense to isolate one arm or one leg and stay to the outside on the side of the isolated arm so their other weapons. Look how much farther away my fist is compared to my wrist right here. So if my opponent had control of this wrist and especially was applying a reverse wrist lock, there's no way in hell I can hit their face from here. They're a foot and a half too far out of my range. Even if I try to drag, which is very hard to do against a reverse wrist lock, by the way, if I try to drag my arm around, I'm still a good 6 inches from the end of my fingertips, which the reverse wrist lock, the pressure is really right here on the knuckles, but it's felt on the wrist. All right. But the point is, the reverse wrist lock is a good way to isolate an arm and then keep their weapons off balance and away from you. And then you can kick their knee out and stuff like that. Or this thing I was discussing in the video yesterday, where you push out on the wrist and in and up on the elbow to chicken wing them, all right, and they're off balance this way, then you kick their knees out and kick their guts out and so forth. All right. This puts a lot of pressure on the shoulder and elbow, well, a hell of a lot of pressure. You can probably dislocate someone's shoulder if you do it full power. You can certainly throw them backwards with this technique and make them hit their head on the concrete or something like that in a street fight. So, and yes, this works especially against unskilled attackers because it's a fact that the average unskilled fighting man in the United States, for example, only punches with about 1/5 to 1/10 the speed and force of a trained fighter. All right. So if you're the martial artist and you're practicing your punches and your techniques, your grappling techniques and your striking techniques, and you're up against somebody who is unskilled and is attacking you, then you should be able to easily block and trap and pin their striking attacks because their striking attacks are moving in slow motion compared to the guys you sparred in the dojo. All right, so that works. So I covered 2 topics. I covered the grappling and isolating their weapons, and I covered recovering from a missed roundhouse kick, which again, roundhouse kicks are fine in sport fighting or else dojo fighting, but in a real street fight, you don't want to go above, say, thigh level with a roundhouse kick, unless it's an incredibly rare situation where you might kick to the liver, supposing that it was available. Because of the risk of losing your balance and giving up your back in a real street fight, which with no referee there to stop the fight, if you give up your back in a real street fight, you could end up dead. Because they could rear naked choke you to death, or they could stab you in the back, draw a weapon and stab you in the back pretty quickly, or something like that. So you don't want to give up your back in a real street fight at any cost. You got to be doubly careful not to give your back in a real street fight. All right. Thank you very much.